Hi there. If you're reading this, I want to thank you for stopping by. My name is Nora Winslow, and I'm about to take you on a journey through one of the most unexpected and transformative chapters of my life. Before we dive in, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button or bookmark this page so you don't miss a single episode. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Now, let me introduce myself properly. I live in a cozy little town just outside Boston with my husband, Evan Winslow, and our 2 kids, Beckett 8, who's wise beyond his years, and Lila 4, whose energy could power an entire city block. On paper, we're a typical suburban family. Evan's a financial consultant, always dressed in crisp suits and glued to his phone. Me, I spend my days juggling parenting duties, teaching yoga classes at the community center, and sneaking moments to work on my pottery business. But here's the thing about appearances. They can be deceiving. Beneath the surface, cracks were forming in our marriage, ones I tried hard to ignore. Little did I know, those cracks would soon widen into chasms, all because of a surprise Evan thought would end everything. But enough teasing for now. Let's start at the beginning. I remember the day everything changed as vividly as if it happened yesterday. It was a crisp autumn morning, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the pies baking next door. Beckett was practicing his multiplication tables aloud while Lila chased Lees around the backyard like they were her sworn enemies. Meanwhile, I was elbow-deep in clay, shaping what I hoped would become a decent vase for a client. Evan had been acting strangely distant lately, but I chalked it up to stress from work. He'd come home late every night, muttering about deadlines and spreadsheets under his breath. When I asked him if something was wrong, he'd give me that same forced smile and say, "It's nothing, Nora. Just tired." Looking back, I realized I should have pushed harder, asked more questions, paid closer attention to the way he avoided eye contact during dinner or lingered too long in his car after pulling into the driveway. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, isn't it? At the time, I convinced myself things would improve on their own. After all, we'd weathered storms before. What made this one any different? That weekend, I decided to tackle some spring cleaning, a futile attempt to distract myself from the unease brewing inside me. While sorting through old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a treasure trove of memories, wedding photos, dried flower petals from my bouquet, and letters Evan had written me during our courtship. Reading them brought tears to my eyes. His words were so full of passion and promise, a stark contrast to the strained silence that had settled between us now. Later that evening, as we tucked the kids into bed, Evan kissed me goodnight absent-mindedly before retreating to his study. I stood in the hallway, clutching one of those old letters, feeling like I barely recognized the man I'd married. Was it possible to lose someone without even realizing it? The next morning, Beckett asked me why Daddy looked sad all the time. His question caught me off guard. Sad? Evan didn't look sad. He looked preoccupied. Or maybe that was just my denial talking. Either way, I brushed it off with a weak laugh and told Beckett not to worry. Deep down, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was looming on the horizon. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. One Friday afternoon, Evan came home early carrying a large envelope and wearing a nervous grin. "Pack your bags," he said. "We're going away for the weekend." At first, I was thrilled. Evan hadn't taken a vacation day in months, and the idea of spending quality time together sounded heavenly. Even the kids were excited, especially when Evan revealed we'd be staying at a lakeside cabin in Vermont. But as we drove north the next morning, I noticed Evan fidgeting with the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. Something wasn't right. When I pressed him for answers, he simply said, "You'll understand when we get there." Those 5 words sent shivers down my spine. Whatever he had planned, I knew it wasn't good. The cabin was beautiful, a rustic retreat nestled among towering pine trees with a panoramic view of the lake. But its charm was lost on me. As soon as we unpacked, Evan pulled me aside and dropped the bombshell. He wanted to separate. "I think we've grown apart, Nora," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't want to keep pretending everything's okay when it's not." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. How could he do this? To me, to the kids, to us. Did he really believe walking away was the solution? I begged him to reconsider, reminding him of all we'd built together. But he just shook his head, saying it was for the best. The tension hung thick in the air over the next 2 days. Evan and I put on brave faces for the kids, but Beckett wasn't fooled. On our second night, he approached me while I was washing dishes and whispered, "Mom, are you and Dad getting a divorce?" His question broke my heart. I knelt down and hugged him tightly, assuring him that no matter what happened, we both loved him and Lila more than anything. But Beckett wasn't satisfied. "If you love each other, why are you fighting?" he asked. I didn't have an answer for him. Instead, I promised we'd figure things out together. Little did I know, Beckett already had a plan brewing in that brilliant mind of his. On our last night in Vermont, Evan suggested we take a walk along the lake. As we strolled in silence, Beckett suddenly piped up, "Dad, do you remember the time you taught me how to skip rocks? You said practice makes perfect, right?" Evan nodded, confused. "Yeah, buddy. Why?" "Well," Beckett continued, "maybe Mom and you just need more practice. Like skipping rocks. Sometimes it takes a lot of tries to get it right." Evan froze mid-step, staring at our son as if seeing him for the first time. For a moment, I thought he might cry. Instead, he ruffled Beckett's hair and muttered, "Maybe you're smarter than me, kiddo." That conversation planted a seed of doubt in Evan's mind, one that would grow into something much bigger in the days to come. After we returned from Vermont, Evan threw himself into work like never before. It was as if he thought burying himself in spreadsheets and client calls would somehow make everything easier, or at least distract him from the mess he created. Meanwhile, I oscillated between anger, sadness, and sheer exhaustion. How could he drop such a bombshell and then act like nothing had changed? But it wasn't just me who noticed his behavior. One evening, while helping Beckett with his math homework, I overheard him ask Evan, "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" Evan froze, pen poised midair, before muttering something about being tired and walking away. Beckett shot me a look that said more than words ever could. "We have to fix this." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Evan's announcement in my head. Part of me wanted to scream, to fight, to demand answers. But another part, the quieter, more stubborn part, refused to give up without a fight. Our marriage might be broken, but I wasn't ready to let it shatter completely. Evan traveled to New York for a business conference shortly after our return, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was using it as an excuse to avoid facing us, or himself. My suspicions deepened when Isla, one of my closest friends, casually mentioned seeing Evan having dinner with a woman at a trendy restaurant downtown. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I spent the rest of the day spiraling, imagining worst-case scenarios where Evan moved on with someone else while I was left picking up the pieces of our shattered family. By the time he came home, I was seething. "Who was she?" I demanded the moment he walked through the door. He looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "The woman you were having dinner with in New York." His shoulders slumped, and he sighed. "Her name's Claire. She's a colleague. We were discussing a project, Nora. That's all." I wanted to believe him, but trust felt like a fragile thread stretched too thin. Still, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of guilt or regret, that made me pause. Maybe he wasn't entirely blameless, but perhaps he wasn't fully gone either. The next morning, I decided to take control of my own narrative. If Evan was going to leave, I needed to be strong enough to stand on my own 2 feet. So, I signed up for a local pottery workshop and began pouring my emotions into my art. The process was cathartic, transforming my frustration and fear into something tangible and beautiful. One afternoon, while shaping a delicate bowl, I realized I hadn't been fair to Evan either. Sure, he'd blindsided me with his announcement, but I'd also been guilty of shutting him out emotionally. Over the years, I'd stopped sharing my dreams and fears with him, retreating into myself instead. Maybe we'd both contributed to the distance growing between us. That realization didn't excuse his actions, but it gave me the courage to write him a letter. In it, I poured out my heart, my fears, my hopes, and my willingness to try again, if only he'd meet me halfway. I slipped it under his pillow that night, unsure of how he'd react, but knowing I had to take the first step. When Evan found the letter the next morning, he read it silently at the kitchen table, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "Nora, I don't know if I can fix this." His honesty stung, but I appreciated it. "You don't have to fix it alone," I replied. "We do it together or not at all." Our conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument, each of us airing grievances we'd buried for years. I accused him of prioritizing work over family. He countered by saying I'd become distant and unapproachable. It was raw, painful, and necessary. Just as things reached a fever pitch, Beckett burst into the room, tears streaming down his face. "Stop fighting," he shouted. "Why can't you just listen to each other?" The sight of our son, our bright, brave boy, crying broke something inside both of us. For the first time, we saw the true cost of our conflict, the pain it inflicted on our children. Later that evening, Beckett cornered us in the living room, clutching a notebook filled with scribbles and doodles. "I wrote something," he announced, "and I want you to read it." Reluctantly, Evan and I sat side by side as Beckett began reading aloud. His words were simple yet profound, capturing the essence of love, forgiveness, and the importance of staying together through hard times. By the end, tears were streaming down my face, and even Evan looked visibly shaken. "Mom, Dad," Beckett said softly, "you're my heroes. Please don't stop loving each other." For the first time in weeks, Evan reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. Neither of us spoke, but in that moment, we both knew we couldn't keep pretending everything was okay, or that we could walk away without consequences. The next day, Evan took Beckett fishing, a tradition they'd shared since he was little. As they cast their lines into the water, Evan asked, "Buddy, why did you write that poem?" Beckett shrugged. "Because I miss how happy you and Mom used to be, and because I think love is worth fighting for." His innocent wisdom struck a chord deep within Evan. He thought back to the early days of our marriage, when laughter came easily and every challenge felt surmountable. Had we really lost that spark, or had we simply forgotten how to nurture it? By the time they returned home, Evan seemed different, quieter, more reflective. That night, he apologized to me, not just for wanting to leave, but for neglecting our relationship for so long. Over the following weeks, Evan made a conscious effort to change. He started setting boundaries at work, ensuring he was home for family dinners at least 4 nights a week. He also agreed to attend couples therapy sessions with me, where we worked through unresolved issues and learned healthier ways to communicate. At first, progress was slow and frustrating. Old habits die hard, after all. But gradually, we began rediscovering the connection we'd lost. One evening, Evan surprised me by joining me in the pottery studio. Though his attempts at sculpting were laughably clumsy, the joy on his face reminded me of the playful man I'd fallen in love with. While Evan and I worked on repairing our marriage, Lila unknowingly played her part in bringing us closer. One Saturday morning, she decided to help by hiding Evan's phone, so he'd spend more time playing with her. Instead of getting upset, Evan laughed and spent the entire afternoon building blanket forts with the kids. Watching them giggle and chase each other around the house filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. My pottery workshop culminated in a small exhibition at the community center. To my surprise, Evan not only attended but proudly introduced me to his colleagues as the most talented artist I know. Seeing him beam with pride reignited something inside me, a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what we'd lost. Inspired by my success, Evan revealed he'd been working on a passion project of his own, designing affordable housing solutions for low-income families. Sharing our creative endeavors brought us closer than ever before, reminding us that growth isn't limited to individuals, it can strengthen a partnership too. Beckett's big moment arrived when his class performed their annual talent showcase. Dressed in a crisp, button-down shirt, he stepped onto the stage and delivered his poem with heartfelt emotion. As he recited the final line, "Love isn't perfect, it's messy and hard, but it's worth every tear because it holds us together," he locked eyes with Evan and me in the audience. Tears streamed down my face, and I felt Evan's hand tighten around mine. In that moment, we both knew we'd made the right choice to fight for our family. The standing ovation that followed felt like a celebration not just of Beckett's talent, but of our renewed commitment to each other. In the weeks following Beckett's school play, our family began to heal. Evan surprised me with a weekend getaway to Cape Cod, a place we hadn't visited since our early married days. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness and lingering pain. But there was also laughter, long walks along the beach, and quiet conversations under the stars. One evening, as we sat by a crackling fire pit, Evan turned to me and said, Nora, I don't want to lose what we have. Not again. His voice broke slightly, and for the first time in months, I saw the vulnerability he'd been hiding behind his stoic exterior. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. Then let's rebuild it, I whispered. Together. That trip marked a turning point for us. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were actively choosing to thrive. Lila, ever the mischief maker, continued to weave her own brand of magic into our lives. One morning, she decided to help Evan shave by grabbing his razor and attempting to use it on her stuffed bunny. Chaos ensued, but instead of getting frustrated, Evan laughed until tears streamed down his face. Watching him interact with Lila so freely reminded me how much I'd missed seeing that side of him, the playful, carefree man who used to chase me around the house pretending to be a monster. Later that week, Lila presented us with a family contract she'd drawn up in crayon. It included rules like no fighting, eat ice cream together every Friday, and love each other forever. Though her spelling was questionable, her intentions were crystal clear. Evan framed the contract and hung it on the fridge, calling it our official family pact. My pottery business continued to flourish, thanks in part to Evan's unwavering support. He even started helping me with logistics, managing orders and deliveries, so I could focus on creating. In return, I encouraged him to pursue his passion project, which had evolved into a full-fledged initiative to design sustainable housing solutions for underserved communities. One evening, as we worked side by side, me shaping clay and him sketching blueprints, I realized how much our individual growth had strengthened our bond. We weren't just partners in marriage anymore, we were teammates, collaborators, and cheerleaders for each other's dreams. During a quiet moment one Sunday afternoon, Evan and I sat on the porch sipping coffee and reflecting on everything we'd been through. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, his voice heavy with regret, "for everything I put you through, for not realizing sooner how much I was hurting you and the kids." I nodded, acknowledging his apology, but also owning my part in our struggles. "I'm sorry too," I admitted, "for shutting you out, for letting resentment build instead of talking to you about how I felt." We both agreed that communication, or lack thereof, had been at the root of our problems. Moving forward, we vowed to prioritize honesty, patience, and understanding. It wouldn't always be easy, but we were determined to make it work, for ourselves and for our children. The final piece of our healing journey came during a family picnic in the countryside. Surrounded by rolling hills and golden sunlight, we laughed and shared stories, marveling at how far we'd come. Beckett read another poem he'd written, this one about forgiveness and renewal. When he finished, Evan stood up and clapped loudly, shouting, "That's my boy." As we packed up to leave, Evan pulled me aside and handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the words, "Worth every tear." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "Thank you," I whispered. That night, as we tucked the kids into bed, Evan wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "We're going to be okay," he murmured. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. Months later, life had settled into a rhythm of mutual support and understanding. Evan had become more present, not just physically, but emotionally, and I had rediscovered my confidence and independence. Our children thrived in the warmth of a united home, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our backyard, Evan turned to me and said, "You know, I think we're better now than we've ever been." I smiled, knowing he was right. The cracks in our marriage hadn't disappeared entirely, they never would, but they'd been mended with care and intention. And somehow, that made our love even more beautiful. Beckett's talent continued to shine, earning him recognition beyond his school. When he won a regional poetry contest, he dedicated his award to Evan and me, for showing me that love is worth fighting for. Hearing those words brought tears to my eyes, reinforcing the importance of perseverance and communication in relationships. Lila, meanwhile, declared herself the family glue, insisting that her antics kept everyone laughing and connected. While her methods were unconventional, she wasn't entirely wrong. As I sit here writing this final chapter, I can't help but reflect on our journey. Love isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about choosing to overcome it. Even when cracks appear, a relationship can be mended if both parties are willing to fight for it. The last scene of our story takes place on a crisp autumn evening, the same season that marked the beginning of our trials. This time, however, the air feels lighter, filled with the sound of laughter and the promise of brighter days ahead. As Evan, Beckett, Lila, and I sit around a fire pit roasting marshmallows, I look up at the starry sky and feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. To anyone reading this, who might be facing challenges in their own relationships, I want to leave you with this. Don't give up too soon. Fight for what matters. And remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest wisdom. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've enjoyed the story, please share it with others. It might inspire someone to take that first step toward healing. Until next time, take care